We've all dreamed of the fairy tale. The chance meeting, the whirlwind romance, the glittering palace, and the prince who offers you the world. It's a fantasy sold to us in storybooks and movies. But what happens when the fairy tale is a carefully constructed lie? When the palace walls aren't just adorned with gold, but are stained with blood and built on a foundation of terrifying, global secrets. This is not a fairy tale. This is the true story of Ariana Collins, a New York art curator who traded her independence for a crown, only to discover that her prince's kingdom was a gilded cage, and her husband, the keeper of the key. This is a story about the courage to question everything. The peril of uncovering the truth, and the shocking reality of what it takes to bring down an empire of evil from the inside. If you're captivated by real-life stories of intrigue, where the line between hero and villain is dangerously blurred, then you need to hit that subscribe button. We don't just report the stories, we dissect the lies and uncover the human truth beneath. Don't forget to ring the bell, because the twist in this tale is one you won't see coming. The Alcazar Palace was a monument to impossible wealth, a sprawling complex where the very air seemed to shimmer with opulence and unspoken power. On a night painted with 1,000,000 desert stars, Ariana Collins moved through its vast, silent hallways like a phantom. Her heart was a frantic bird beating against the cage of her ribs. Each footfall on the chilled marble was a potential betrayal. The crystal chandeliers overhead, each one a constellation of 1,000 hand-cut crystals, cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to reach for her with skeletal fingers. She was dressed in a custom, ivory silk nightgown from a Parisian designer, a garment so expensive it could have funded a small village for a year. Just 6 months ago, these same hallways had echoed with the joyous cheers of thousands. Celebrating her storybook wedding to His Royal Highness, Prince Adnan al-Rashid, the dashing, progressive heir to one of the most powerful and secretive dynasties in the Middle East. The world's media had dubbed it the wedding of the century. Tonight, the only witness to her progress was her own reflection in the gilded mirrors, a face pale with a fear so profound it felt like a physical illness. Her emerald eyes, once celebrated in magazine spreads for their sparkle of intelligence and newfound love, were now haunted, shadowed by sleepless nights and the chilling weight of discovery. At 28, Ariana had been the perfect princess, beautiful, educated, an American art curator whose worldliness lent a sheen of modernity to the ancient monarchy. But those glossy magazine covers could never capture the cold terror that had taken root in her soul, a terror born from the pages of a simple, leather-bound journal now clutched desperately to her chest. She reached a part of the palace she had only ever seen on forbidden blueprints. This was the threshold. Before her stood a heavy, unadorned wooden door, a stark, almost offensive contrast to the gold-leafed archways and intricate mosaics that defined the rest of the Alcazar. This was the entrance to the servants' wing. Taking a shaky breath that did nothing to calm her nerves, she pushed it open. The transition was visceral. The opulent silence of the main palace was replaced by a low, industrial hum. The scent of jasmine and sandalwood vanished, replaced by the acrid tang of bleach, stale cooking oil, and human sweat. Gone were the vaulted, hand-painted ceilings. Here, the ceiling was low, made of acoustic tiles stained with watermarks, lit by the harsh, flickering glow of long fluorescent tubes that cast everything in a sickly, greenish light. "Your Highness." The voice was a hushed, strangled gasp. Miriam, the palace's head housekeeper for over 3 decades, stood frozen mid-stride. A wicker basket of freshly pressed linens nearly slipping from her grasp. Her face, a road map of wrinkles earned through a lifetime of silent service and observation, was a mask of pure, unadulterated alarm. "You cannot be here," she whispered, her eyes darting down the empty corridor. "If His Highness discovers, he's the one who sent me," Ariana interrupted, the lie feeling like a shard of glass in her throat. But her voice, honed by months of royal appearances, held a steady, authoritative tone that belied the tremors in her hands. Miriam's eyes widened, the disbelief in them so profound it was almost comical. Why? The question hung unspoken in the humid air. Why would Prince Adnan al-Rashid, the ruler of a nation, the owner of a personal fortune that dwarfed the GDP of small countries, banish his beautiful, beloved new wife, the woman he had defied tradition to marry, to the servants' quarters? The answer was not in Adnan's orders, but in the journal pressed against Ariana's chest. Its soft leather cover contained a truth so devastating it could shatter the al-Rashid dynasty and trigger an international scandal. It was a chronicle of missing girls, of encrypted financial transfers, of secret meetings in the dead of night, and of mysterious, unexplained deaths, all of them connected by a single, sinister thread that led to a forbidden section of the palace, the heavily guarded East Wing. "The Blue Room is ready, as His Highness ordered," Miriam finally whispered, her voice trembling. She gestured with a slight, nervous tilt of her head toward a plain, gray door at the very end of the bleak corridor. Her dark, knowing eyes continued to scan the shadows, as if expecting the royal guard to materialize at any moment. The room was a monastic cell. A narrow, single metal-framed bed with a thin, lumpy mattress stood against one wall, a cruel joke compared to the sprawling, silk-draped, four-poster bed in her royal suite. A small wooden desk, its surface scarred and stained by decades of use, occupied the opposite corner. A single, grimy window was set high in the wall, offering a sliver of a view of the desert moon, which now seemed less romantic and more like a cold, unblinking eye. As Ariana sank onto the bed, the springs groaning in protest, her diamond wedding ring, a flawless 10-carat emerald-cut stone, caught the dim light, scattering tiny, mocking prisms across the bleak, painted walls. 6 months ago, standing under a canopy of stars in the palace gardens, with Adnan's warm, sure hands clasping hers, she had believed in destiny. She had believed the fairy tale. Now she knew the truth. Some fairy tales were just beautifully decorated prisons. She pulled out her journal, the pages worn from constant handling, and opened it to her most recent entry, the handwriting jagged and rushed, a physical manifestation of her panic. The missing girls weren't trafficked out of the country, as the official reports claim. They're still here, hidden within these very walls. And Adnan. God help me, I don't know if he's their savior or their jailer. The evidence points to a monster, but my heart remembers the man. I will find out the truth, even if it costs me my life. As if on cue, the fluorescent light in the corridor outside sputtered, buzzed angrily, and died, plunging the tiny room into near-total darkness. In the suffocating silence, broken only by the frantic beating of her own heart, Ariana Collins closed her eyes and steeled her resolve. She had not come here to hide. She had come here to wage a war. Because sometimes, the only way to expose a truth buried deep within a throne room is to first descend from the throne and walk silently among those who polish it. What would you do if you discovered the person you loved most was living a double life? Could you confront them? Could you investigate them? Let us know in the comments below. Your instincts might be better than you think. The first, faint thread of this intricate web began to unravel not in a dark corridor, but in the bright, sunlit opulence of her official office. As the new princess, Ariana was the glamorous public face of the al-Rashid Foundation's flagship project, the Girls' Education Initiative. It was a cause close to her heart, a way to use her position for genuine good. But as she sat at her massive mahogany desk, reviewing the quarterly donation records, a cold knot of confusion tightened in her stomach. "This doesn't make any sense," she murmured to the empty, ornate room. The Foundation's public reports boasted of granting over 50 full educational scholarships to underprivileged young women from across the region in the past year alone. But the internal financial documents told a different, far more nebulous story. The money trail was a labyrinth of shell companies with names like Desert Star Holdings and Oasis Logistics, and vague line items for administrative fees and logistical support that dwarfed the actual amounts sent to universities. The funds, it appeared, weren't going to tuition and books, they were disappearing into a corporate black hole. Driven by a curator's instinct for detail and pattern, Ariana began a private, quiet investigation. She cross-referenced the names of the scholarship recipients with social media, university enrollment databases, and public records. The result was a chilling, consistent pattern. Every single girl who had received a scholarship had vanished from all public records within 3 to 6 months of their acceptance. No new social media posts, no contact with family back home, no university registration. They were digital ghosts. They had, for all intents and purposes, ceased to exist. A soft, hesitant knock at her office door made her jump, her heart leaping into her throat. She quickly shuffled the damning papers into a neat, innocent-looking stack. Enter. It was Miriam, carrying an ornate silver tea service. The older woman's hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as she set the heavy tray on the edge of the desk. "Your afternoon tea, Your Highness," she said, her voice subdued. "Miriam," Ariana said, her tone gentle but probing. "Is everything all right? You seem troubled." The housekeeper hesitated, her eyes flicking towards the stacked papers on Ariana's desk before meeting her gaze. A silent understanding passed between them. Then, leaning forward under the guise of adjusting the teacup, Miriam spoke in a whisper so faint Ariana had to strain to hear it. "Be careful what you search for, Your Highness," she breathed, her words laced with a fear that was almost palpable. "Some truths in this palace are buried deep for a reason. To dig for them is to risk being buried yourself." Before Ariana could form a response, Miriam had hurried from the room, leaving behind the delicate scent of jasmine tea and a growing, icy dread that settled deep in Ariana's bones. That night, sleep was impossible. Lying in the impossibly soft, vast bed next to Adnan, listening to the calm, steady rhythm of his breathing, she felt a chasm opening between them. The man whose touch had once felt like a promise now felt like a question mark. The prince she loved was a stranger wearing a familiar face. Her digging grew more desperate, more clandestine. She used her security clearance to access palace logistics software, cross-referencing delivery schedules and security logs with the dates the scholarship winners were supposed to have arrived. She discovered that security camera footage from the palace's east wing, a zone that was strictly off-limits, even to her, was systematically wiped or labeled corrupted on the exact dates the new students arrived. The pieces of this horrifying puzzle began to snap into place with terrifying clarity one evening as she was returning from the palace library. Passing Adnan's private study, the heavy door slightly ajar, she heard the distinct, sharp tones of a heated argument. "The arrangements are becoming too risky, Your Highness," a man's voice growled. Ariana recognized the gravelly tone of Abdul, Adnan's head of security, a man with the cold eyes of a hawk and a loyalty that seemed to begin and end with the prince. "The shipping manifests are being scrutinized. People in the Port Authority are asking questions." "Then ensure they stop asking," Adnan's voice replied. But it wasn't the warm, gentle voice he used with her. This was a voice she had never heard, cold, sharp, and dripping with an authority that was absolute and ruthless. "Use whatever means necessary. The operation continues as planned. The next group arrives in 3 days." Ariana's blood turned to ice in her veins. She pressed herself flat against the wall, her silk robe clinging to the cold stone, her heart hammering so loudly she was sure they could hear it. "And your wife?" Abdul asked, his voice lowering. "She's been making inquiries, investigating the Foundation's records. She's getting close." There was a long, terrifying pause. Ariana held her breath, her entire world hanging in the balance of the next words. Leave Ariana to me, Adnan finally said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. She is curious, but she suspects nothing. I will handle her. He was wrong. So terribly, dangerously wrong. In that moment, standing in the shadowy corridor, Ariana went from a curious wife to a determined investigator. The man she loved was at the center of something monstrous. The plot is thickening. The evidence is mounting against Adnan. But is it all as it seems? What's your theory so far? Is he a cold-hearted trafficker, or is there a more complex game being played? Let us know in the comments. The biggest twist is still to come. Tie of the servants' quarters. Ariana's investigation took on a new, more dangerous dimension. She was no longer observing from a place of privilege, she was embedded in the palace's underbelly. And the conspiracy she began to piece together was far wider, more sophisticated, and more sinister than her worst nightmares. It was in the steamy, loud confines of the industrial laundry room, the thunderous hum of the machines masking their conversation, that Miriam finally confirmed her deepest fears. It's not just the palace, Your Highness, the old housekeeper confessed, her eyes constantly scanning the entrance. The network. It spreads like a poison across 6 countries. Businessmen, diplomats, even other royals. They are all connected. Ariana's journal quickly filled with a spiderweb of names, dates, and numbered Swiss bank accounts. The scholarship program was merely the elegant, public-facing tip of a vast and brutal international trafficking ring, one that used diplomatic channels and corporate fronts to move young women across borders like cargo. But Adnan's role within this nightmare remained a maddening, terrifying contradiction. At times, from snippets of conversation she overheard or the grim set of his jaw after a late-night phone call, he seemed genuinely tormented, a man carrying a crushing weight. At other times, he was the cold, calculating CEO of the entire evil enterprise, issuing commands with an emotionless efficiency that made her soul shiver. The danger around her escalated rapidly. A young, idealistic kitchen worker who had been feeding her information was found dead in his tiny apartment in the city, an apparent suicide from a fall from his balcony. The official report was swift and conclusive. But Ariana knew. He had been the one who told her about the secret deliveries to the East Wing. Then, the most devastating blow came. Miriam met her in the secluded palace gardens, her face ravaged by tears under the moonlight. I cannot help you anymore, Your Highness, the old woman sobbed, her voice breaking. They have my granddaughter. She lives in the city. They showed me pictures. If I don't stop, if I say another word. Ariana felt the walls of the palace closing in, not just of stone and marble, but of fear and complicity. Her network of informants was crumbling, her allies being picked off one by one. She was running out of time and running out of friends, yet the evidence was mounting to a critical mass. In her journal, she now had enough to expose a global trafficking network that reached into the highest echelons of power. But she also had nagging, persistent doubts that refused to be silenced. The East Wing wasn't just a prison. The hidden security footage she'd managed to access showed Adnan there late at night, alone, often speaking with the young women, not with the menace of a captor, but with the intensity of a teacher? A commander? Servants who cleaned the outer rooms reported hearing not cries of distress, but the low murmur of lectures and the tapping of keyboards. The contradictions were tearing her apart. Was her husband a monster who enjoyed playing mind games with his victims? Or was she, in her righteous fury, missing a crucial, paradigm-shifting piece of the puzzle? The answer came in the dead of night. A single, folded slip of high-quality vellum was slid silently under her door. Her breath caught as she recognized the elegant, precise handwriting. It was Adnan's. My love, I know what you've discovered. Your courage terrifies and astounds me. But nothing, is as it seems. Meet me in the East Wing. Tomorrow, at midnight. Come alone, my brave Ariana, or all will be lost. It was either the moment of revelation, the truth she so desperately craved, or the most beautifully written suicide note ever composed. The walk to the East Wing at midnight felt like the longest journey of her life. The palace was a tomb, every shadow a potential assassin. She had hidden her journal in a hollow behind a loose stone in the fireplace of the blue room. If this was a trap, if she was walking to her death, at least the truth would survive her. She stood before the imposing, reinforced doors of the East Wing, her heart a frantic, wild thing in her chest. Taking a final, steadying breath, she pushed. The doors, unlocked, swung open silently. But the dungeon she had braced herself for, the scene of horror she had painted in her mind 1,000 times, did not materialize. Instead, she stepped into a blindingly bright, state-of-the-art command center that would not have been out of place at CIA headquarters. Banks of monitors covered the walls, displaying live satellite feeds, real-time financial transactions, and surveillance footage from cities across the globe. And there, at the center of this high-tech hive, were the young women, the same faces from the missing persons files, the scholarship recipients. They weren't chained or frightened. They were focused, intense, their fingers flying across keyboards, their voices calm and professional as they spoke into headsets. And standing among them, a tablet in his hand, was Adnan. He turned as she entered, his expression a complex tapestry of exhaustion, relief, and unwavering resolve. "Welcome to the real operation, Ariana," he said, his voice soft but filled with a fierce, proud intensity. Ariana stood frozen in the doorway, her mind refusing to process the scene. I don't understand." Adnan led her to a soundproofed glass office overlooking the main floor. "The trafficking network you discovered, the one run by my uncle and his international associates? We, myself, Interpol, MI6, and a few other trusted agencies, have been working for 5 years to dismantle it from the inside. But to infiltrate a snake pit, you must become a snake. We had to appear to be the ones running it." He pulled up files on a large screen, classified Interpol briefings, undercover agent reports, coded communications. "These women aren't victims anymore. They are survivors. They are our most valuable intelligence assets. We rescue them from the real traffickers, and those who choose to stay are trained in cybersecurity, forensic accounting, and intelligence analysis. They help us track down the other monsters, freeze their assets, and rescue more girls. The scholarship was their extraction. The East Wing is their sanctuary and their war room." Ariana sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. The world tilted on its axis. Every piece of evidence, every suspicious act, rearranged itself in her mind, forming a completely different, breathtaking picture. "The secret meetings?" she whispered. "Planning sessions with international agents. The coded messages? Communications with our allies. The financial transfers to shell companies? A way to funnel money to fund our real rescue operations and confuse their accountants." "Why?" she asked, her voice cracking with the weight of the deception. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because your investigation was the most perfect cover we could have ever hoped for," he explained, his gaze earnest. "The real traffickers, including my own uncle, have been watching you. Your genuine horror, your secret digging, your righteous anger. It was the ultimate proof that I was truly on their side, that I was keeping my naive, Western wife in the dark. You sold the lie, Ariana. You protected this entire operation with every suspicious look and every secret note you took." Before she could fully process this staggering revelation, blaring, strident alarms shattered the relative quiet of the command center. On the massive wall screens, they watched as dozens of armed guards, loyalists to Adnan's uncle, stormed the palace grounds. The conspiracy had been exposed prematurely. The enemy was making their move, and they were coming for the East Wing. What followed was a night of sheer, unadulterated chaos, a desperate, violent siege within the palace walls. But Ariana was no longer a frightened princess. She was a soldier in the war she had accidentally joined. When the sun finally rose, staining the desert sky with hues of blood and gold, the corrupt were in handcuffs, and the truth, at long last, was free. In the aftermath, the al-Rashid Foundation was reborn, no longer a sinister front, but a legitimate, powerful global force for rescuing and empowering women. The palace itself was physically and symbolically transformed from a place of dark secrets into a beacon of hope and justice. And Ariana and Adnan's marriage, tested and tempered in the furnace of the most profound deception, emerged not broken, but stronger, built not on a fragile fairy tale, but on the unshakable foundation of shared purpose, mutual respect, and hard-won truth. Ariana learned the most valuable lesson of all, that the most powerful revolutions aren't always fought on loud, public battlefields, but in the silent, dark shadows, by those brave enough to question the story they've been told, and by those courageous enough to live a lie in service of a greater truth. She went looking for a monster and found a hero. And in the process, she discovered the hero within herself. This story is a powerful reminder that reality is often more complex than it appears, and that true courage lies in seeking the truth, even when it terrifies you. If this journey of deception, redemption, and ultimate courage captivated you, please share this video. It might just inspire someone to look a little deeper, to be a little braver. Subscribe and hit the bell for more real-life stories that prove that the line between good and evil is a battle fought within the human heart. Thanks for watching.